that you have been observing in terms of types of investors, classes of investors, their interest in different classes of infrastructural objects. Do you feel this is typical, or do we, as usually, think too much about our Russian national specifics, or is it the same discourse that is being held in any investment forum in any country? What would you say?
Okay. Just to give you some idea about the types of infrastructure projects in Asia, as published by the Asia Development Bank, roughly the portion of power and utility is similar to transportation. They, as far as I recollect, roughly 40% power, 40% railway or other infrastructure projects, predominantly railway projects. That's roughly composition. Russian situation may be different. Now, that's the demand side in Russia, but the more important thing is supply side. What sector they prefer is the most important question. For obvious reason, these guys are investing for the benefit of their own country. And what's the benefit? The higher portion of their export content. For example, they like power sector very much, because if you see the cost composition of power plant, roughly 60, 70, including all these mechanical, whatever, electrical equipment is actually export content. Civil portion is probably 30%. They like it. For example, if you are talking about light railway transit system, that's a high value-added project, so they like it. If you are talking about just simple plain vanilla railway project, basically their export content is like 20, 30%. Somehow, for example, rolling stock can be manufactured in Russia because it's not a rocket science. So there must be a priority. For example, they like something high value added, definitely. So preference is definitely go for power plant, light transit railway system, high speed, less so on plain vanilla road project, less so on plain vanilla railway project. Having said that, what is more important is, because there is, as I mentioned to you, political will, any project in Russia which are targeting to attract investors' attention from Asia is that should, that should be structured in the proper way to allocate risks properly. Just give you, although it maybe just look pedantic, I just give you some idea about the risk. For example, if you just categorize all the risks, there are some risks which can be measurable, means you can calculate the risk, or which can be controllable. Those risks, which may be controllable and measurable by Russian standard, cannot be controllable or measured by Asian standard because it's simply, unknown territory to Asian investors. So the most important thing is those risks, which you can understand better, should be allocated to you, and you have to be responsible for it to attract investment from Asia. Just give you some idea, those risks which cannot be controlled, which cannot be measured by Asian standard, is what the famous John Maynard case said, uncertainty. They simply do not know. So if you're pushing them to accept such risk, they will just back out. Even though there's a pressure from the top, they will not do it because, as I mentioned to you, the bureaucrats who is sitting in the KXM and JBIC knows the minister and president will go away in about a couple of years' time. And if somebody comes in, they'll be criticized and they'll be kicked out. They know it. They will never accept the risk. Therefore, from the initial planning of a project, you have to just carefully monitor and analyze all the risks. That some risk should be actually borne by Russian party, and the most important risk of such is basically market risk. The most important thing that should be provided by Russian party is some sort of short-foot guarantee, because investors are never comfortable on the Russian market. Sometimes the government has a long-term project, plan, long-term government goal, which cannot be necessarily matching with short-term performance. They know it. Lots of things are actually governed by the government policy and purely local issues, which can never be comprehensible by foreign investors like Asian investors. So those risks, as long as it's covered by some government guarantee program or PPP, or there are many cases where PPP is not available, then if a bank like VTB or VEB can organize a facility to provide a shortfall guarantee, it could help a lot to attract investment from Asia. That's the one thing. And second thing, from Asia's perspective, is currency risks. As I mentioned to you, all the revenues in Russian projects are actually generated in ruble. And if they borrow in yen or Korean won, which is very attractive in terms of yield, obviously they are exposed to long-term currency risk for more than 10 years. They will never accept it. Now, solution is very simple, unless you are not spoiled by the American economist theory. Meaning, as long as both governments, for example, Japanese government or Russian government, agree on certain currency swap regime, it works. Because Japanese yen is controlled by Central Bank of Japan, Russia side is controlled by the Russian Central Bank. Therefore, there is no room for Americans to involve in between. And currency risk, and people are just so familiar with the textbook theory of what they call covered interest parity or some forward rate theory. Let's just forget about it. It's purely can be decided by the two central banks. For example, if the Japanese central bank agree that they will fix the ruble against Japanese rate, fixed for 10 years, to tailor made to the principal and interest payment scheme, that works. Currency risk will be gone. In the worst scenario, Japanese government may suffer loss in case there is a ruble depreciation, but they can easily print money, which will never affect the inflation. So as long as there is some sort of a discussion between each government to set up a facility, what I call currency swap facility between these two countries, under a certain limit, only earmarked for infrastructure projects, that can alleviate many of the concern about foreign exchange risks. Now, can it be really happening? Well, there are some important projects that Russia has right now, such as high-speed railway projects and so on and so forth. Everybody is really keenly interested in participating in those projects. And my suggestion is use this interesting and sexy project as a bait to set up such currency hedging facility. For example, Japanese are hungry for deals, Koreans are hungry for deals. If you just tell them, look guys, we have a sexy projects like this, but as long as you set up a sort of facility to fix the interest rate on a long-term basis, we can give you some chance and they will accept it. That's my understanding, according to my discussions with the ministers and all these important people in the government level. So, if you have some interesting project like Russia highway project or something else, that can be an easy, that can be a very good instrument to attract their attention and push them to set up a certain facility to hedge against certain risks, such as currency risks. So, it needs a further discussion between government, how to maximize support from each government, but one has to just think very strategically.
Спасибо большое вам, Ханс.
Hans, thank you very much. We have 5 minutes left. I need to squeeze in 2 interventions. First, Mr. Seleznev, Pavel Seleznev, head of Private-Public Partnership Center. Pavel, you have up-to-date statistical data. Could you please bring in a microphone for Mr. Seleznev? You've got up-to-date statistics in the current market breakdown. Could you say that the approaches that we are discussing now, if they are in line with the statistics that you have? And second, Maxim, after Pavel Seleznev gives his remarks, could you please summarize our today's discussion in terms of financing transportation infrastructure projects? I'll try to be brief.